What's up, folks? This is Justin Garcia, aka Master Chim, and on the line from the other side of the planet. I don't know how the fuck you got there. He'll explain it to me. My man, Big Eric Uresk, who runs Phuket Top Team right now.
Yes.
The MMA part of Phuket Top Team. I'm already confused. I know you for a long, long time now, but say what's up to the Pressure Project fans, Eric.
Hey, what's up, Pressure Project fans? I'm real stoked to be here. I'm a fan of the movement, if that's what you like to call it, and yeah, I'm just stoked to to come here and talk about some pressure to power kind of stuff.
Awesome, very awesome. So how long have we known each other, Eric?
I was just thinking about that. We met in an illegal warehouse fight in. I want to say I was about 25 at the time, so I'm 37 now. Around 12 years.
Fucking A. Those underground fights, I think it was way back in the day. Yeah, that's awesome. And so to give everybody a background, first of all, I also have another connection with you in that we're very close to the ground. So how tall are you, Eric?
I'm 5'6", on a generously 5'6", probably just under 5'6".
Right. So I am the same thing. So I no longer put 5'6" on my license because I figured let them think I'm a little shorter than I am, then put 5'6", let them think I'm a little taller than I am.
Yeah, so, I take the half-inch.
Short people rule the world. That's all right. So give everybody here a background on where you're from and how you grew up to eventually get into MMA.
Well, I'm from Long Island, New York, originally, Suffolk County. I basically got involved in the martial arts through wrestling. I had seen the early UFCs, like when they first came out, so like 93, I believe. And I was getting them on cassette tapes at the time. And I was just enamored with it. I was enamored with that kind of stuff since like Bloodsport and even Karate Kid as like a 4-year-old. And my family was too poor for like martial arts lessons, so I would just kind of like practice moves in my basement on my brothers. You know what I mean? You do what you got to do when you don't have any money. And
when did you start wrestling though?
I didn't start wrestling till late in life, man. I got introduced to it when I was 15. I wrestled for a year and a half in school, and then I was a problem child, so I wasn't allowed in regular school, and I ended up becoming homeless and living on the street at about 17, and in and out of jails, rehabs, group homes, psych wards, all that kind of stuff, and just was on a bit of a merry-go-round.
So you're wrestling life.
Yeah, I was fucking getting my ass kicked by
You're like, fuck it, I'll just wrestle everything.
Yeah. And I got involved in some stuff a kid at that age definitely didn't have any business being involved in. And yeah, man, I just couldn't keep on the straight and narrow, but I just knew, like, I still loved that stuff, and I had a natural grasp for it. I just couldn't keep my head on straight. I didn't have any positive male role models in my life. Like, my dad was around, but more a work 7 days a week kind of provider guy, but there was no strong leadership around, and I think that's really important for young men, and it's one of the reasons I take what I do now so seriously, because fighters are broken for the most part, man. They're like strippers, like the male version of strippers. Right. They're a bit broken up, and so around 20, I started trying to really get my life together, and I wanted to get back into wrestling. I really liked Greco-Roman wrestling, and it fascinated me. Throwing really fascinated me. So I started to venture into Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, with a man named Yuri Volensky, who's pretty well known in wrestling circles, and a lot of fighters go to him. He was a coach during the Soviet Union time for Russia, and produced an Olympic gold medalist at one point in time. So very, very good coach. At the time, there was tons of savages from all the former republics. So Belarus, Uzbekistan, all these really, really tough, high world-class level guys. So I would go there, and I would go to the New York Athletic Club. And these Russian guys beat the fuck out of me every day for the first year. I would drive 2 hours in, sit in that Belt Parkway traffic, go wrestle for 2 hours, get my ass kicked. And, you know, Greco is not gentle at all, man. I was taking hard falls, you know, fuck, man, probably 100 times a night between reps and live action. And, you know, I'd drive home, crawl up my fucking driveway dead, you know, get up from my little, you know, little shitty job that I had to do to make enough money to get there, and then just do it all over again. And I was, I just knew like I wanted to do something with that stuff. And I just kept at it. And after about a year, I started throwing back and getting pretty good. And, you know, they took me to a level where I could wrestle with world-class guys, you know. I didn't really understand how to compete at that point. So I would lose stupid matches, but I'd beat some guy I wasn't supposed to beat either. And I knew I wanted to get into fighting at some point. And it was not too long after that, a couple years later, I started, you know, I would play around with grapplers when I could. I thought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was really cool. And I thought all the martial arts were cool. And I got exposed a little bit here, a little bit there. And, you know, this is still no holds barred at this time, right? So, like, man, we're probably like second generation MMA guys, right? Second generation. So, you know, a lot of people getting into it today don't know that MMA wasn't a thing, right? You had to go to a bunch of different gyms.
My guys have no fucking idea what it was like back in the day.
No, man. You had to drive all over the place, you know?
Right.
To a boxing gym. Almost nobody went to a wrestling gym. So it was like striking, a kickboxing gym, or a BJJ gym. And then you just kind of broke up your training and did the best you could. And so I started fighting in those underground fights. And actually fought Frankie Edgar there. Every now and then that video surfaces on the internet. And started getting involved and didn't have any real training, man. I was messing around. You know, I knew how to wrestle good enough, but the rest of my game was completely lacking. And I started training with a small gym on Long Island. And took a couple fights, and probably wasn't ready to start fighting yet, if I'm honest. But we didn't have amateur back then. You could do illegal or pro.
Right, yeah.
That was it, right? And so.
Who were you training with on Long Island?
The D'Angelos.
Do I know them?
Yeah, you might know. There was a whole group of them. There was a couple of sons, and Mike was a bigger guy. They started with Derek Panza and Kyoto.
Right,
they
sure.
Did their own thing at some point in time, and all the sons fought to some degree or the other, and the dad was a decent coach at the time, and so that kind of was falling apart, wasn't working. So I had met Mark Lehman when I was out wrestling at Nationals in Las Vegas, and so I just packed everything in my car. I had like $1,500 to my name that I saved up bouncing in the Hamptons, and drove out to Las Vegas, and I didn't even have a place to live or a job. And I just knew I wanted to train at Cobra Kai. At that time, Vegas was like the hot spot, you know? And Mark had all kinds of guys coming through, and Extreme Couture was just opening at the time. And Vegas was just a good place to be, and it made sense to me. So I just made it work, you know? No life skills. So you're talking about a guy that's barely 2 years sober now. After so I finally got clean when I'm 23 years old, and been clean since then. So I have no life skills at all, and I'm just figuring shit out. I have no money management skills. Forget about that. I'm working at some shit bar on the Las Vegas Strip, like pretty much getting death threats from like pimps and gangbangers like every night that I'm gonna get shot in the parking lot. It's whatever. I was having a good time. And man, just working to train. Literally nothing else mattered at the time, and literally nothing else matters still to this day. Very, very little outside of martial arts means much to me. It's pretty much what I put all my time into. And so I'm in Vegas. I'm training at Cobra Kai. Mark Lehman was still there at the time. And, trying to learn jiu-jitsu. I'm a complete goon. The worst part, if I met me now, I would have slapped the shit out of me. Just a bad training partner. Tremendous ego. And I guess people let me around because I had talent, but real asshole at the time. Like if I was to assess myself current day.
I always got along with you. I didn't think
I guess you got the good parts of me, but I was just deep down. I had a lot of shit to work out, and martial arts really helped me do that. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But ended up getting brought over to Extreme Couture. The wrestling coach at both gyms was the same guy. This guy Jason Townsend. I believe he wrestled a bit at Hofstra as well. So we knew a lot of the same guys. He brought me over to Extreme Couture. And that was that. Introduced me to Mike Pyle. Mike Pyle said, pay your dues, come in, don't injure anybody, and be a good training partner. And, and we'll take it from there. And, had a great run at Extreme Couture, won a few fights there. And that was, I remember stepping on the mat, and it's like, Randy, Frank Trigg, Forrest Griffin was there all the time at the time. Like, Jay Heron, another New York guy. It was insane at the time, man. Vanderlei was in there all the time. It was nuts, dude. Vitor was in there all the time. Like
great room.
It was so crazy. And I'm just seeing all these guys. I remember like literally my second practice there. I'm grappling with Frank Trigg. I'm getting the upper hand in the grappling, so he just fucking rips my ankle apart, just like as a temp. But I'm so happy to be there. Like, I'm not even angry at the guy. Like, clearly did that on purpose. Just kind of grabbed a toe and ripped my ankle in half.
Well, you weren't the only one with an ego.
yeah, exactly. Now I look back at it, probably wasn't the coolest thing in the world, but I was just happy to be there amongst these guys. To speed up this whole spiel, I end up mostly in Vegas, and then I go home for the summers to bounce in the Hamptons and save up money and come back. And I end up going home. Things start to get a mess. I wrecked my car in a wreck in Vegas. So I'm trying to open up my own gym, which gyms are not. It's a business. You know what I mean? And you can't run it like a hobby.
There's levels to this shit, right?
Yeah. And at that time, I was just not mentally equipped to do anything like that, I just thought, I'm going to open a gym. People are going to come, and I'm going to fucking make a lot of money. And that is not how it works. It really doesn't matter who you are. There's levels to this shit. And guys that are successful, they work their ass off to do that. That is not free money. And so I figured that out fairly quick. And got a call from a coach, who was Joe Stevenson's coach, and I had worked with him a little bit when Joe Daddy was getting ready to fight BJ Penn for the UFC title. This is the early days of the lightweight division, the second coming of the lightweight division.
Who was his coach back in the day?
Irvin Bounds was the guy's name. Irvin Bounds, kickboxing coach out of somewhere near the California Nevada border. I can't think of the town, Riverside area, something like that. And asked me, hey, do you want to help BJ get ready for the Frankie Edgar rematch? I'm like, fuck yeah, I would definitely love to go train with BJ. She's like, yeah, he's going to do camp out in LA. And then you might stop in San Diego and help out Dominic Cruz a little bit. And at the time, I'm like, fuck Dominic Cruz. Like, I don't care about that, But so I end up doing whatever I got to do to get a flight ASAP. I end up going out to San Diego. So that's my first stop. I'm going to go there for a bit, and then I'm going to go work with BJ. The BJ thing never happens, but I'm digging the vibe at Alliance. I'm like, oh, this is like a real team structure here. The coach oversees everything and everybody. Everybody does everything like a team. And I felt like I was going to progress here,
Right.
And so I asked Eric Del Fiero, who's the head coach and still is at Alliance. I said, hey, man, can I stay here? Right. And he's like, yeah, sure. First he was going to like charge me to live in the gym, but then I think he saw he could get some use out of me. at least helping out with wrestling practices, and then, be a decent training partner. So I lived in the gym for 18 months above Alliance in like barracks-like conditions, like Spartan-like conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was like, man. It was little Sparta. It was literally, we'd go up, we'd have these mattresses laid out up there, and after a while we kind of decked it out, like turned it into like, it's like going to jail. You gotta like make the best you can,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, wake up, 10:30's practice, go to fucking war every day, 5 days a week, and then evening individual skill practices or strength and conditioning. And some of the best times of my life, and Alliance was fantastic for me. I really grew as a martial artist, and Eric started kind of groom me as a coach. I think he saw have a good understanding of how the whole game sort of ties together. So there's a lot of skill set coaches out there. There's very few guys that can tie a lot of things together and understand the middle ground, because there's, you have your separate martial arts between the wrestling, grappling, and striking, and then there's a place in the middle where you can't quite define what it is. And I think that's what makes an actual MMA coach, right? The guy that understands all that and how to put those things together and how to do that with each individual fighter, because you can't coach everybody the same. Mentally, you can't coach everybody. Psychologically, you can't coach everybody the same. And tactically, you can't coach everybody the same. And how to do that is a real skill, and it's something I'm studying constantly.
Right. So how long were you at Alliance for? You said about a year and a half.
4 years total.
4 years total.
I lived there. For a year and a half. Yeah, I lived upstairs for a year and a half on 3rd and K, Chula Vista, just outside San Diego. It's like North Mexico, basically, right? It's and then got a cool little apartment in the actual city of San Diego. And man, some of the best times of my life. San Diego is still the best city I've ever been to in the world, and hope to end up back there at some point in my life. I was doing great there. Was undefeated at Alliance, and hadn't lost any fights there. Was tearing it up. And just got into a rut where I couldn't get fights. Like 2 years went by where I trained for a fight and it canceled. And so it's a lot of fights in a row. And that happened to me twice in my career for 2.5 years each time. So it was like 5 years total of canceled fights. And man, that's it's one of the hardest things in the world to deal with, because when you're fighting, nothing is more important than fighting. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. I would let a family member perish if it meant this fight's not going to get canceled. At the time, I'm so selfish and tunnel vision. Literally, my first cousin's, got to die, or I got to fight. That guy's gone. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, but fighting, nothing meant more than that to me at the time. And so when you put your all, and there's this buildup and this stress, and then nothing happens, there's something chemical inside that just doesn't get released, and so it fucking takes its toll on you, man. And so I feel for guys, man. Even if it only happens to once to you, it sucks.
Well, I tell my students at the school, I only had two fights, both professional. Like you said, back in the day, there was no amateur and stuff. I committed to 10 fights.
Yeah.
So I only had 2 out of the 10 fights that I committed to. And it was because either the promotion got shut down, I lost my opponent, or some combination of those two things. So, this whole thing today where, people there's a card every fucking weekend, and you have options of who you like. These things are unheard of back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. In California is even harder because their athletic commission is such a pain in the ass to work with.
Right.
At least Jersey was early in the game, so there's still a lot of bureaucracy, and it's probably cost you more than you're going to make in the fight. But it wasn't that bad. California was tough, man. And if you wanted to get a fight on a small show, you had to sell tickets. I don't know nobody in California.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so they would have it if you can't sell tickets, you can't fight.
Right.
So you got stuck in a real shit spot, and it is what it is now. But at the time, it was soul breaking to me at the time. So that being said, I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to go out to Asia, right? So the Leone brothers, who now own and run Bali MMA, I used to coach them in youth wrestling for a little bit as a kid. And yeah, so we're both from pretty close, you know, not a couple miles away. So I said, hey man, what's going on out there? Like, you know, like anything. And they were just getting ready to split Phuket top team because that's where they were working and go open up their own thing. So the wrestling coach job opened up. I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to go out to Asia and fight. And same thing happened here. So hard to get fights. And by the time I was 35, I trained for a fight and I was feeling great. And it got canceled 3 days before. And I just couldn't do it again. I knew at that point in time, like, there's no way I can dump my soul into this again because I only know one way to prepare for a fight. I'm not one of those guys that's going to be a journeyman and just, you know, stay in a bit of shape and take fights. Like, I'm going to train like a fucking insane person and pretty much ignore every other aspect of my life for 6 to 8 weeks. And I just couldn't invest that kind of energy anymore. And I knew I wanted to start coaching. You know, at that point, I knew it was going to be something that happened. So for the past about 2 years now, I've been the head coach of Phuket top team.
So you went there first with the Leone brothers. They got you a fight out there, and you decided,
no. I came out here.
How did that work?
The owner brought me out here to coach. So I was on the fight team. There was really not a lot of structure to the fight team. I like structure, so I started doing things structured. Everybody started following suit. So I was kind of like the leader long before I was the head coach. Everybody just started kind of following what I was doing, and that was it's pretty much like a team leader. And then kind of walked into the head coach role. It just kind of was a natural fit, you know. So I've been retired for 2 years now. I'll take a Muay Thai fight if I get the itch, you know, just to get in there and bang it out, and I'll probably start competing in some of the professional grappling things, just to, you know, because I still train twice a day, so and I want to start competing in grappling. It just seems like a fun thing to do that won't take too much energy away from coaching, and I don't really give a fuck. I just want, you know, just the thrill of competing is nice, and so in anything. So yeah, and that's where I'm at currently. So now, you know, 2 years in, we've got 3 major world titles, from 2 from the biggest promotion in the UK. It's Bama, and we had a girl win the women's title in one championship earlier in January this year. So that was cool.
Which is another huge promotion now.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So the group of people you have there. So I'm trying to wrap my head around. You're in Phuket. You have people from all over the place that just sort of find their way there. Like, how does that work for most of the people that are there?
So what you got to recognize is, like, there's not a lot of super gyms on this side of the world, right? Or gyms where you can get everything. So if you're in Australia, you can forget about wrestling, right? If anything, they'll have some guy. It's usually like an Iranian immigrant that teaches freestyle wrestling, completely no application for the fight game at all, right? That's at best, and that's largely the case in England as well, and most places in Europe. The ground game in most places is far, far, far behind. You do have some people that are exceptions to the rule. Striking is decent in some places, and almost nobody can put the stuff together on this side of the world. There's really not a lot of guys that just can't do it yet. It's just, I guess, a bit young and immature as the sport, you know, hasn't really, it's just really starting to take over within the past 5 years, right? So that's really young. So people flock to Phuket because it's like it's cheap, right? Fighters are broke. So to put it in perspective, my dollar here will go 3 times as far as it will in New York. Okay. Right. Let alone if you're from someplace affordable, right? Probably 5 times as far. Yeah, it's very affordable. You get better coaching than you will in most places where you're from. Better sparring partners than most places where you're from. So rather than stay home, okay, I'll invest $1,000, $2,000 into my camp. I'll go out to Phuket. Hotels are dirt cheap here, right? They're not bad, decent accommodation. And so it makes sense, right? If you're a broke-ass fighter, where do you want to go, right? You're going to go to the place where you can get the best training for the least amount of money. So we get people from pretty much a lot of UK people, decent amount of people from Europe, Scandinavia, Germany, tons of Australians, lots of Chechens, Dagestanis, Russians. So yeah, we get a good mix of guys from all over the place.
And now they'll just come there. So this is like a foreign idea for me, in practice at least. I mean, I'm exposed to it, but the whole idea of I want to be a fighter. I don't have a team. I'm going to go to this fucking country and train with a bunch of guys I don't really know that well, and that's going to be the way that I fight. How do they make the transition, or what is it like, I guess, in the environment there that accommodates people coming in that you might not have known a month prior to that, but now you're training them for a fight? You don't even know that much about them. How does that work?
No, it's a good question. I kind of take that for granted because it just works at this point. But we have some guys that actually live here year round, so they form like the core base of guys that are going to be around. Then I have other guys that are from wherever. They have their gym home, right? Their gym at home knows that's probably not the best preparation they're going to get, right? So they got to concede. All right, yeah, go there. That's a good idea, right? Where you're going to get better training, better sparring, better coaching. Then usually they'll contact me or the owner. Hey, I want to come out. If we feel like they're going to be a good fit, sure, come on out. Sometimes it's guys in the UFC. Like Paul Daly's coming out to spend a couple weeks with me in October. He's fighting for Bellator, but we get lots of guys from the UFC that come out all the time to do pre-camps. So I have guys that'll come out. A lot of UFC and Bellator guys will come out with me for a few weeks before camp to work on stuff, right? Because camp, you're not learning really in camp. You're game planning and getting in shape, right? Getting sharp. You can't really – how much skill development is going to happen in camp? It's too late for that, man. You should have been skill developing weeks outside this fight. That's your job in between camps. So they'll come out for me to do some skill development just before camp. So I get a lot of guys that like to do that too. They'll come out, could be a couple weeks, could be a couple months. It all depends. And then we have the core group of guys. And I'm basically the final judge. Like if you don't fit, it's like I have zero issue just telling you to go train down the street. We have Tiger Muay Thai down the street, AKA Thailand's here. So like there's other gyms for you to train at. I just don't think you're going to be a good fit here. Sometimes I'm a little less polite than that, but
So
I got to make it work.
The guys that live there, how do they make money?
Well, fighting, hopefully, right? You could get a Muay Thai fight every week if you want here. You're going to make like $150 for it, but some guys will take those just to keep a little pocket money. A lot of guys work online, do stuff online. You can teach English online. Some guys have sponsors. Some guys end up teaching classes or teach them private lessons. So I have a couple guys that there was no job for them when they got here, but I saw value in them. So we created a kids program for one of my guys. I got this kid from England who's he's 2-0 right now, and I would be shocked if he doesn't end up in the UFC at some point. He's super talented and worked with autistic kids back home, so he knows how to work with children. You know what I mean? So now we have a kids program here for all the expat kids. This class has like 20 expat kids in it 3 or 4 days a week, So he created
that many people there.
Tons.
Like run a kids program.
You got to come out here. You will love it. Bring the boys. The family will love it. Like there's so much to do here as far as training and then beaches and whatever else, man. Like it would be an ideal trip for you and the boys. Like it would be like cool, man. It's a cool place to come. So yeah, there's tons of expats here. Like I don't have any Thai friends.
Right.
Which is fucked up to say. I've been here for 4 years, but it's just
it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. I don't hang out with them. I hang out with, expats.
Right.
And tons of
That's
them.
awesome. And how safe?
Super safe, man. I've never been in a in a city in Southeast Asia, period, where I felt unsafe. Not once did I feel like, something's about to go down. Like, you know, like I've definitely felt worse than walking around New York, you know,
right.
At different points in time. But yeah, it's safe, dude. It's real safe.
Right,
They're
right.
Buddhist, you know, so a lot of them are Buddhist here. So it's just a different vibe, man. Not that dishonest shit doesn't happen. Cab driver's probably going to try to jack the price up on you, but you can kind of haggle everything. So once you're here for a little while, you learn the ropes and you know what to pay for what.
Right, right. And what's their currency over there?
Baht.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've been in a game like myself, you know, from that, you know, I like saying that the second generation of guys. And here we are, 2018. I run, you know, my school in the Bronx still, and have guys that are active. You obviously, you know, you're in the middle of it over there. What do you think has happened? Let's talk a little bit about MMA and what has evolved with MMA, and what do you think about the way it is now compared to the way it used to be?
Well, the biggest thing is back when we started, you'd get a lot of traditional martial arts types, right?
Right.
Crazy guys off the street, guys that invented their own style kind of guys. I mean, you know, we used to have these guys like walk in all the time. Can I, you know, wanting to come to sparring? Like, you know, you're like, are you sure? You know, like, and you know, I'm sure you've had that.
Work, right?
Yeah. So like, now there's athletes. Like,
right.
In the early days, you didn't have to be an athlete. Now, if you're not some kind of athlete, you are not going to make it in this sport. It is a sport for world-class athletes. These guys are fucking athletes, which has its good and bad things. Some of the martial spirit gets lost in the pursuit of sport, and that's something I make sure that I maintain in my room. It's really, really important to me. I don't care if you're a fucking superstar. If you're not interested in character development as a part of your training and like looking inside to see where you're weak, and becoming stronger and becoming a better version of yourself, I have zero interest in working with you. Zero. Right. If you want to come to me for skill development, whatever, cool. I'm not gonna, you know, we don't have to get that invested. If you're one of my guys, we are going to do that. And if you can't do that, then we're not going to work. I'm not the guy for you. And that's not to say you can't be a successful fighter. You could be a world champion for all I know. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in developing a relationship where character development isn't at the forefront.
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, we have that in common. I run a pretty tight ship in my academies. I see the development of it as a sport because I think there's a parallel in jiu-jitsu. Now, you've gotten a black belt in jiu-jitsu since way back. So you're part of the jiu-jitsu community too, obviously. As the sport has developed, it's almost like supply and demand. There are so many opportunities to compete now. And it sort of allows for a culture where you don't really have to pay the piper character-wise or martial arts-wise, and you could still have plenty of applications, plenty of opportunities to do the sport. So, you know, I remember back in the day, you know, running school in my school in the Bronx and having guys come in and challenge me to fight, guys that would come in and it's, you know, every once in a while you'd have somebody that say, you know, I want to be a professional fighter. And when you're telling me that in 2004, 2005, I'm like, well, you better go and fucking box because you ain't making no fucking money here. And I think that was a major difference too, is that there was no support system to accommodate these people that didn't have a passion for it, that didn't, you know, really love it or in some cases need it. You know, you had, you know, your journey. I had one that was similar in that I was not fitting in society until I started dedicating myself to becoming a better person. And that was through martial arts, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Jiu-jitsu is very similar. And you know, I keep jiu-jitsu violent, man. Like I don't lose focus of what it is. And I don't really hate on the sports stuff either. Some of it's cool, man. It's fucking.
I love sports jiu-jitsu. Absolutely.
It's fucking fun, dude. It's super fun. If you want to pull guard, like whatever, you know what I mean. It's not my cup of tea, but I don't really get so hung up on that stuff. But yeah, the bottom line is you don't make money off character development, right? You're not going to get rich off people looking to seek the fucking worst parts of themselves and try to challenge that. That's not fun. There's nothing glamorous about it, and it's not enjoyable, right? And so, like in the way society is kind of structured today, you're not going to make a ton of money like pushing that unless you sort of find like a niche market, you know? And a lot of people aren't equipped to do that. How many people are equipped to help develop people character-wise? I know a lot of world champions in a lot of different sports that I don't want character advice from.
Right.
You know? And so, yeah, I think there's a lack of like mentors and leaders out there too, and that would explain why that's so few and far between. You know, you get some cult leaders for sure, but as far as guys that are going to lead young men and women to better character, I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that are qualified to do so.
Right. Yeah, I think it's to the point now where, I mean, obviously I have 4 kids. I have a wife. I have a family to support. It's hard for me to take a hard position on a large scale level of just following what I want to do. So, and I think you're probably similar. I think a lot of coaches that I know are similar in that they keep the people that are close to them to a certain standard that they just can't afford to keep everybody else to, because nobody else would be there. I tell my close group of guys, it's like, if I ran every class in this school like I run this room, it would just be us. And they putting the eviction notice on the fucking door.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not such a bad thing either. Look, man, like, you know, a lot of people, if not most people, are weak, right? And so, you know, we can't murder them or fucking call them off, okay? So, man, even if they just get a little stronger by just being around strong people, well, then you're doing a good job. You know what I mean? Are you going to turn everybody into, you know, like strong men, strong women? Probably not. You know what I mean? Does society need everybody to be super strong? Probably not. There'd be a lot of arguments if everybody was like me and you. You know what I mean? Like, how many me and yous can there be before there's going to be some, you know, there's going to be a little bit of friction going on. So it's not such a bad thing. I think, you know, those people that seek it, they will hopefully they find the person to kind of bring them along their path. And whatever anybody else is getting out of the rod, that's cool, man. I mean, you're going to get some personal development out of it, hopefully. It's kind of hard not to.
You know, when talking about weakness, you know, I always say everybody is charged with climbing their own ladder. So I call people weak who refuse to climb. I don't call them weak based on what rung they're at. Right? So
for sure.
You know, so if you're somebody who is a fat mess that's doing nothing but playing video games and beating off his whole life and decides to come and, you know, train a couple times a week, well, that is a hugely significant change for that one individual.
Absolutely.
But it's certainly not what we're going to build an army of warriors off of, you know, the grand scale. So I agree completely. Let's talk about in the world of MMA, one of the things that I am admittedly envious of you for is you get to coach guys in different rule sets around the world. Yeah. So my whole thing, in my ideal world, right, if I buy the UFC, right, which they'd have to sell it to me for like $100. Anything more than that, I can't afford it. And I could change the rules as I saw fit. There would still be kicks to downed opponents. There would still be knees to the head. I wouldn't have any of these sort of rules that people sort of game still, you know, the hand on the floor.
Yeah,
they're starting to
fucking nonsense, dude. Like, you can't fucking knee from a front headlock. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it makes no fucking sense.
Hey, look, you want to protect the spine? I got no problem with that. Right? That makes sense. If I'm going to knee you in the top of the skull because you're on a front headlock, yo, sorry. Like that's a game changer, right? The front headlock you're taking away so many weapons where that could be such a valuable position on the mat, and you can't use it to its full effectiveness. So here, we have the show. It's a sort of a developmental show. So it's a smaller show here called Full Metal Dojo. Great show out of Bangkok, right? This guy John Nutt, he's actually an American guy, owns the company, and full MMA rules, soccer kicks, all kinds. And I've seen them. I've seen guys get soccer kicked unconscious, and I fucking love it, dude. It's a real fight. You know?
Right.
Like, how many guys I think that fight would want those rules actually, like, taken from them? You know? Like, I don't buy the fighter safety shit. I don't really.
It's all bullshit. That's one of the things, like, how fucking safe is fucking fighting supposed to be? Like, that is not the nature of what it is that people do. And just like you said, and I agree, in my experience, I know I'm of this way, I don't want safe rules. I don't want rules that protect me, because they protect him. And that's not what this is about.
No, and it's at the end of the day, it's to make it palatable to.
Right, it's got to be packaged.
Yeah, whoever's fucking writing laws, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's to make it more palatable to those people. But if you're a true fighter, I don't think that you want too many rules.
Right.
You know, I mean, especially ones that don't make any sense.
You never fought for Ring of Combat, did you?
Once.
In Jersey. So in Ring of Combat, they don't, and Lou Neglia, I love Lou Neglia. I'm a Lou Neglia fan. He and I have always gotten along, and he's always done a good job. That's me being political for a sec. But they don't have elbows. You know, so it's tough. Now, I understand he probably has to jump through some hoops in order to have the casino or the hotel sign off on his product and the commission at one point. But one of the hurdles that I have with my guys is they're always preparing for different rule sets. So what is your experience with that? And how do you accommodate somebody who is, because I'll be honest, like, we don't train soccer kicks because my guys are probably never going to have a fight where there's soccer kicks in an MMA match. So
it's pretty simple. If you can soccer kick, well, you can soccer kick and sparring. Just don't fucking take your teammate's head off. You know what I mean? If you've got a guy turtling up and you want to Toriando and throw a head kick, you know, be reasonable about it. You know, we're real simple, right? If you spar hard, respect your training partners, right? And if you disrespect your training partners, I'm going to disrespect the fuck out of you. And you're not going to like it. You know, like, I'm still on the mat every day. So, like, we'll handle it one way or the other. So guys don't get out of line. Like, if we got to train that, we train it, you know, but we just train it intelligently. It all starts with the leadership. Like if guys know they can't fuck around, you know, or be disrespectful, they're not going to do it. You know, accidents are always going to happen, man. You know what I mean? But it usually, you know, that kind of like hurting people on purpose just don't happen in the room. I more than likely I'll pick up on you don't belong here before that even happens, you know? Right. So seldom do we have guys doing stupid shit, you know? Yeah, if you got a guy down on the ground, you know, throw the knees towards the head. Obviously, don't fucking skyscraper knee him in the temple. You know, use common sense. Keep your training partners healthy. It's a pretty simple philosophy, but yeah, we just weed out assholes really quick, and we don't have those issues. It's pretty simple.
So now, you have these guys coming from all over the world. They're coming there to train. It seems to me like I'm on your Instagram. I'm always looking at, you know, the things that you're doing over there, and it seems like, you know, you get to train violence in paradise. Well, how often now are you actually traveling around the world with these guys to coach them? Because, like you said, some of them might have home gyms, and like, how does that work? How much are you dedicated to making sure you're there for their corners?
So all depends on the guy, right? A lot of guys don't want to pay. If you think I'm cutting my ass anywhere outside the country for free, you're crazy. You know, this is still a business, you know, and a lot of guys don't want to pay. If they don't want to pay, cool, you can still come train, but you're not getting anything extra. And I'm not asking for the world, man. Like 10% is not a lot, you know.
Right.
It's pretty reasonable. So,
but
yeah, it's fucking standard. So I'm going to Australia September 22nd. I got a guy fighting in Australia, so I'll go to Perth, and then I'll go down to Brisbane for a few weeks. For a week. Sorry, for like a week of seminars down in Brisbane, and then I fly back. I think I have some other traveling to do too. I go to the UK quite often. I've been to Russia for some fights. The Middle East, I have a lot of guys fighting in the Middle East fairly often. So yeah, man, I'm traveling all over. I think I have another fight in Bangkok November 3rd, which is always fun. Just hopping up to Bangkok. It's like an hour and a half flight, so it's super quick. Just get up there, enjoy Bangkok for a couple days, and have a good time with the fight. So I like traveling for the most part.
Right.
I'm pretty introverted, so as long as I hate sharing hotel rooms. It fucking mentally just destroys me. So I need to be alone. Like, but it's part of the job. So yeah, if it's one of my guys, if we got to go on the road, we're going on the road.
Right.
So, yeah.
Where do you enjoy going the most? As far as like MMA, where do you think it's like, man, if I could have my guys fight at this promotion, it's the best experience for everybody involved?
Well, I mean, the UFC is pretty fun to go to UFC events. You know, I was actually cornered at the UFC in where Ronda fought Holly and lost, and that was one of the most surreal things I ever seen. Yeah, they put us up in this crazy hotel, gave us a bunch of per diem, and so the fighters usually give me the per diem. So we just fucking ransacked Melbourne that week. I was still single at the time, so I had a fucking great time over there. Now that I'm single, the road's not as fun. But now that I'm not single. Yeah, now that I'm not single, now that I'm engaged, the road's not quite as fun. But yeah, man, that was surreal. I'll never forget being in the green room after my guy had fought. It was good day. Guy won, and first win in the UFC, and we're seeing the fight unfold, and I'm like, yo, Holly's gonna knock her out. I'm like, you watch. Right. And she's, you know, sure enough, she sleeps with literally every single person that was in the green room. Coaches, corners, fighters, staff stood up and cheered when Ronda got knocked. She was just not well liked, and it was just a very surreal moment to see everybody just so like enthralled. Right. This moment in history, really. It was pretty cool to be there. I like fucking Bangkok, man. There's a small show called Full Metal Dojo. They put us in great hotels right in the thick of the city. And it's just a good time, man. We go up a couple days early and just have a blast. You know, the fights are fun, full rules, full, just nothing you can't do. And it's just an awesome experience to go up to Bangkok for a couple days.
Yeah, that sounds like fun, man. I talk about introvert. I don't like going anywhere, man. I have this philosophy where I feel like I've met too many people in my life already. So I'm trying to sort of whittle people down. If I'm at the top of the mountain, as I start picking up speed as I get older, it's a matter of just like removing people. So at the end, sure. The perfect amount. But,
I like being around people. I don't necessarily want to talk to you. You know what I mean? I enjoy
the energy of
cities, and I like the energy, that just the buzz that you know, traveling sort of creates.
Now, how do people in Thailand treat you? You're like similar to me. You look like this angry, like fighting midget. Like how are you received there? How do people deal with you there?
Well, the locals, local men will always like come up and like touch my arms. They're like, "Oh, you're good body." Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. Women here love white guys, so that doesn't hurt. You know, or they just don't pay any attention to you at all, really, the foreigners. And as far as everybody else, the people that I encounter in the gym, it's weird. They have a deep respect for coaches over here, particularly like my Russian guys, like even or the Dagestanis and the Chechens. Like when I walk in the room, everybody stands up. It's kind of it's a little weird. I'm like, it's not necessary, but they stand up. Everybody will come and walk across the room to like shake my hand. I'm pretty sure if I needed somebody whacked, like these guys would do it for me. Like, yeah. Like if I needed somebody taken out, I'm pretty sure these guys would do it on the drop of a hat. So they have it's pretty cool, man. They, treat me real well. Thing is, you got to get these guys respect though. They don't just give you respect. Like I'm on the mat training with them. Like you have to like literally like take their respect. And then once you have it though, it's pretty surreal the way these guys treat you.
Well, I think that when you look at the masculine cultures that still exist around the world, they understand hierarchy, they understand power, they understand strength, respect, because it's a very functional culture in that sense. If you don't have respect, you don't make it in that culture. And these guys are raised like that, and they're raised in a very functional manner. They are given the tools to survive in a very hard reality from the time they're young. And you see that reflected in how they are. You don't have these boisterous fucking idiots.
Particularly the Muslim Russians.
Right.
It's just a hard place that these guys come from. A lot of them have family members that were killed in conflict of some sort. It's just a hard place. They grow up in the mountains. The land that they come from, it's beautiful, but it's hard,
Hard living.
Yeah, it's hard, they're just a hard people in general. I have a lot of admiration for the people of the Caucasus. I certainly see some things that are broken with their thinking.
Don't get me started.
On the flip side of that, they do not embrace vulnerability in the training room. And so, in my opinion, there's a ceiling on how good they can get technically. Because if you're not willing to lose in the gym,
right,
I don't see how you're gonna take your level as high as it can be. And this is a lesson I learned late in life. Dominic Cruz had warned me about this when I was still actively fighting. He said, it's like, fuck, man, you're so good. You just don't want to lose in the room. And it's like, you're not going to get better like that. And I wish I didn't wait till like the last couple of years of my career to start heeding that advice. And, and this is kind of something it's appropriate for your podcast because, if I had to take some real hard looks at myself, and I did so as I started getting into my 30s. And the truth of the matter is there was some bitch in me, right. It probably stemmed from my childhood, just a fear of failure and stuff like that. But it was so deeply ingrained in me that I didn't want to be a fucking loser, that I wouldn't take risks in so many different areas of my life. And I didn't have anybody like to help me develop that, and to be honest with myself. And that's why I'm like, I call it when I see it now. When I see that in a guy, if I see bitch in somebody, I call it out right away because I wish somebody would have done that to me. Like I wish, Dominic tried to hint at it. I just couldn't hear it at the time, Right. And I actually, he came to visit me not too long ago, and I thanked him for that. And we just, kind of had a laugh about it. But it's so fucking important, man, to like guys talk about strength and then use the word vulnerability. But man, it's so if you don't know where you're vulnerable, then you're weak. Then you're weak because the second a bully gets bullied, what happens? They fucking break, right? And
I think it gets back to like earlier when I was talking about climbing the ladder. Well, where is your next rung? If you are on a rung that's higher than everybody around you, 100%. You aren't really held to task where that's concerned. But what I've noticed is there are mechanisms that we have, there are tools that we've developed that have helped us at certain points in our life. And as we start to grow, sometimes those tools need to be put back in the tool bag because 100%. They're not serving us well anymore. And what we need for this situation at this point in our life is different. And very similarly, in the application of the MMA world or the martial arts world, like in my school, from the beginning, everybody gets tapped every day. Everybody gets tapped every day. If you're not training until somebody's getting the better of you, somebody who's lesser skilled, then you're just not putting enough effort in. It's not that effective of a session. And obviously this is a general thing, but to just read the mindset of it's okay to lose in the room, you know, and I, you know, very similarly, growing up playing sports, I knew that, you know, if I was, when I was playing basketball, if somebody scored on me, I'd still have to, you know, be productive on the other end of the court, or the next time they're down. When I played football, if I got burned defensively, I'd have to line up with the guy next play and give him my all again. So the application was different. But for fighting, getting burned means another man beats you. Getting burned means you have to say you got it to another man, and it's such an allure for ego, you know, and insecurity that, you know, it's understandably a hump that some guys never get over.
Tough, man. It's tough. And I'm a street guy. You know what I mean? And the street teaches you, like, everything in the street is a mirage, right? You do enough work where you build up a reputation that you don't have to do too much work anymore. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But then you're living off all fear and fucking lies, you know? You can't do that in fighting. The truth comes out all the fucking time. So, you know, like, I just look back now, man. I wish, like, you know, I wish I had myself to point out the bitch that was inside of me at the time. So who knows, maybe I wasn't ready at the time. It came out when it came out, but I know what it cost me, right? And it cost me having a successful fight career, right? Because I couldn't identify that weakness early enough, and I wasn't willing to, you know, and to do what it needed. And man, I'm fucking 37 now. I'm a better martial artist now than I was when I was fighting. Guys are always like, "Oh, why don't you take a fight?" I have no desire to, right? Yeah. But because I started embracing that vulnerability, like, all my skills just fucking shot through the roof. I'm like, it's the great paradox, man. You know, it really is a great paradox, like losing to win, and nobody wants to do that. And these Russian guys definitely do not want to do that, man. I've had a few that understand the concept and they embrace it a little bit. And it's interesting to see what happens with those guys. But on a whole scale, it's just not compatible with their culture.
Yeah, I see that in the Albanians that I train. So a lot of Albanians in New York, you know, and you know, I've had, you know, a lot of very, very good friends of mine are Albanian and have come through the school or I've met through the school. And a common thing, a common hurdle for those people is, you know, listen, you don't got to be, you know, the cool, tough guy who never loses. Not everybody is the prodigy that walks in and just never loses to anybody. Most of us have to work, and, you know, it's definitely a hurdle that I see. It's common. And I think put against the backdrop of their culture, you see that every other area of their culture, they lose if they allow that vulnerability to exist. Yeah. And it's definitely a hurdle. So it's funny that you see that same thing. So I want to get to individual fighters who in your because you've been in a lot of different rooms, a lot of different places. Who is probably the most skilled fighter that you've ever trained with?
Okay.
And they may not be able to put it together fight day, may not be, you know what I mean? Like, all those things taken into consideration. Who are you like, man, this fucking guy is
best guy in the room, and I'm not alone in this. Like, tons of people will say this, Mike Pyle. Right?
Mike Pyle.
Mike fucking, I swear to God. So, like, the casual, not even the casual, but if you haven't been around Vegas, like, Mike Pyle, I've seen him ruin motherfuckers in the gym. Ruin. And he didn't have a bad career either. Like, he won some fights in the UFC, you know what I mean? He didn't get his break till he was like almost 40. You know, he was around for a long time before that. So Mike just kind of stuck around and made some shit happen for himself. He just recently retired. Yeah, man, I seen Mike Pyle fuck a lot of dudes up. My biggest nightmare in the room was Mike Chandler.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Chandler I just was not going to have good rounds with Mike. Like, it's just like, he was just bigger and better at the things that I was good at. And
he was at Alliance? Is that where you trained?
Yeah, he was at Alliance. We trained together at Alliance. And actually, we trained together a little bit in Vegas before that. But yeah, we trained together at Alliance. And I just had a hard time with him, man. Mike really exposed that bitch in me at the time. and I hated it, and I resented him for it at the time. I didn't understand why I resented him until later on, but I'm like thankful for those lessons now. That ego that just didn't want to get exposed, and Mike would expose it regularly on me. And he's just a fucking physical freak.
Right. Who and I don't know, this is putting you out there a little bit, but who were you like, this guy was just fucking could have been better, but didn't develop himself, didn't have a good attitude. Anybody? And I don't, you don't got to put a name on it. Like, listen, you do this for a living. I don't want you fucking calling people out.
I probably shouldn't put a name to that. But yeah, I've met guys like that, man. I've met a lot of guys like that. I'd probably throw my fucking self in that fucking in that should have done a lot more. And for the skill that a person has, like, fuck, man, that's what you did with yourself. Like, what a waste. But so valuable to me now that as a coach, it's so valuable because I worked through the stuff later on, right. Had I not worked through it, it wouldn't be valuable to me at all.
Right. Sure. You wouldn't appreciate
just be the pot calling the kettle black, really.
Right.
But it's such a tool. Identifying fears is fuck, man. What's the purpose of martial arts, man?
Right.
Like, that's really what we're here to do. It's like I sort through fears one at a time, peeling that onion. Man, if you train long enough, you're gonna fucking be afraid of something.
Right.
And it's not just being afraid of the situation. It's deep rooted stuff like that manifests itself, and that's why you're afraid of this. Right. Stuff that maybe happened to you when you were a kid, or just a bad upbringing or whatever, man. It's like there's a real shortage of male role models out there, in particular, and fuck, man, I see the need for it so badly. So it's like take it very serious to make that my job, with the people that I come in contact with.
Right. Well, talking about strong role models, the best coach you've ever been around.
Best coach. Okay. Strategy-wise, Eric Del Fiero's hands down. He's a fucking genius. So, like, I think I do some things better technically than Eric. Like, I can show a fighter how to do a lot of things technically. Eric's still ahead of me as far as strategy and game planning. He's explained things to me, like, just after fights, like, I've watched, he told me what he told the guy in a corner, and I've just been like amazed at how he saw that and was able to get the fighter to make that adjustment within the fight. Technically, Neil Melanson has been a huge influence on me. He was Randy Couture's grappling coach, and he was with the Black Zillions, and he's a guy a lot of guys go to for their grappling, and giant man, but a technical wizard on the ground. A very, very violent form of grappling.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have a student who used to train with me, Montel Williams Jr.
Yeah, he's in Vegas now.
Oh, did you ever get to train with him? Do you know?
No, but my boys run that gym now. My friend's the GM there and knows him well.
Right. All right. Yeah, well, I've known him since he's a kid. He was with me a long time. His family moved out to Vegas. So when he started fighting, I think Neil Melanson was his coach there. And he and his dad, not Montel Williams, but his mother's husband, who really raised him, Mark, they raved about Neil. They said he was great. And they came from my school, so they appreciated, the violence and the grappling. So
Yeah. If you ever get to, he's got a lot of tutorials on YouTube. He's worth checking out his stuff. He's got a lot of free content out there.
Nice.
Really detailed stuff, good stuff. Yeah, Neil was good. I had Sean Tompkins was my coach for a long time. Sean was great. He had his own method that I found really effective. I've been really blessed. Yuri Volensky, the old Russian guy, he's a genius when it comes to wrestling. One of the most technical, just beautiful forms of wrestling I've ever seen. He's just about to be 80, and he's still on the mat coaching. Right. And he's just a brilliant mind for wrestling.
So out of the contemporary active MMA fighters, who is, your model for telling your fighters, this is the guy you guys got to be like? Who's the guy?
The closest thing to a perfect fighter there is George St. Pierre, right? Now, you can, people will say, he didn't finish enough. True to a large degree. That really only started when he went to Jackson's. Before that, he was finishing fights, and he was looking good and looking impressive. And in his last fight, you can't say that he didn't look, phenomenal after being on the shelf for a long time. But find a hole in George St. Pierre's game.
Right. If you can get into his head. But as far as skills, like the fucking guy, I almost begrudgingly agree with you, because I hate that George St. Pierre doesn't finish fights. I hate that he goes from camp to camp sometimes. I love that Sarah knocked him out and sort of brought him back to earth. But when you find a guy as skilled as him, and I talk about wrestling, and you'll have some juice on this, I think, too. With wrestling, people don't get that the sport of wrestling is something that accommodates and rewards a skill set in a certain application. But just because you are a good wrestler doesn't mean that you are going to be a good wrestler in a different application, like MMA. Just in wrestlers, you have throwers, you have pinners, you have riders, you have all these guys that do different things.
Don't translate.
Right. And when you have a guy like George St. Pierre, who is incredibly disciplined, incredibly athletic, his physical attributes are second to none. He has the mindset of the martial artist due to his traditional background. So he doesn't have any of that reluctance to be vulnerable in the room, because he was raised properly where that's concerned. He's an absolute just monster, on the mats in the ring, whatever. But, when I look at who I want my guys to be like, it's kind of hard to find a guy better than George St. Pierre. Although I wish he finished more fucking fights.
Yeah, I wish he finished more fights too. However, I'm going to judge him on his last performance.
Right.
So coming off the shelf, a couple of years, you come out and dominate Bisping.
Right.
Dominate Mike Bisping. And what people don't realize about, some people do, about GSP, his wrestling is effective because of the way he establishes his jab. And he doesn't throw a traditional boxing jab, although he can, but he makes up that space because he comes from a karate background. So that lead hand attack for karate.
It's a lead punch, right? They look at it differently. They categorize it. They apply it differently. Yeah. And there's overlap, basically I'm fucking reiterating what you're saying, but go ahead. I'm cutting you off.
Yeah. So what happens is he gets this, right? And he'll break your fucking face, because he broke Josh Koscheck's face with a jab, right? So it's a power jab. Once he establishes that, anytime you bite, his timing off of that, and his ability to close distance, that's what makes his takedown game so beautiful, right? If if GSP was to wrestle Josh Koscheck in a wrestling match, Josh Koscheck would fucking piss mop him, right? In a straight up wrestling match, like at any point in their lives. But in a fight, completely different. The range is different. You don't have to put your hands on the guy to set up the shot. So I think that's one of the reasons American wrestling translates better, is our setups are a little less technical than the Russians, right? So the Russians, the Iranians, their setups are so ornate, it doesn't work in a real fight, right? If you see where Khabib shoots from, it's from like a mile away, right? He's not actually using his strikes to set up his takedowns at all. So yeah, GSP's wrestling is effective because of that lead hand punch, and more than that, it's effective because of that karate style of distance closing that he's able to just boom, cut to the middle, and then once the mechanics of a jab and a level change are the same. If I do this or this, you don't know which one's coming. So then I can start to use the level change to set up the jab or the strike, and now I've got you off rhythm. Once I got you off rhythm, the fight's going my way.
Yeah, I think, skill-wise, there's a lot of, in application, we're looking to mask what it is that we're doing. And, if we look at just a wrestling background, just like you were saying, ties and different sort of setups for your takedowns, a lot of it has to do with having the guy see the same thing with different outcomes. Well, when you take a specific, like I remember when I started doing MMA, I started learning striking. I learned 90% of my striking from, do you know Steve Katz?
Yes.
Steve Katz, or combined martial arts. Steve Katz, you know, traditional background, boxing background. But when I first started learning how to strike, I wanted my right leg forward because that's where I wrestled. That's where my shot was. And I think the fact that I had to relearn how to shoot with a left lead, a left-legged lead, made me develop that with the overlap of my striking. So I was able to shoot to accommodate my striking and vice versa, as opposed to looking like I'm doing one or the other when I'm doing it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty spot on what you're saying about GSP. So now your favorite MMA fighter of all time.
It's probably Randy, man. It always has been. And then I got to, like, I've never gotten starstruck before. But the first time I saw Randy, like, I just kind of like did one of those, you know, kind of looked at him dumbly. And he's just like, he's a flawed human like everybody else. You know what I mean? Like, he's got his stuff. Like, I got to spend a decent amount of time with him. Like, lived with his kids for like a year, you know, in an apartment together in Vegas. And man, he was fucking, when he beat Tim Sylvia, when Tim was on that run, like, just to come out of nowhere and do that, it's still one of my favorite moments in fighting. And then when he ragdolled Gonzaga the fight after,
right.
It was just, yeah, man. Like, you know, when I was like, you know, really like still like a fan of the sport. Now I'm not a fan. Like, I still watch the fights, but I watch it as a work now.
Right.
Now, you know, and I still love it. You know what I mean? But I'm just looking at things differently. But yeah, so I'm not a fan of too many people anymore. You know, I just look at it all as like, I'm just trying to see what's working and what's not working. But Randy's probably my all-time favorite. I don't think he's the best fighter ever, but he's my personal favorite probably.
Right. All right. I'm a Fedor guy.
Yeah. Right on.
Oh, man, I love me some Fedor. That 10-year run he had where he was just giving everybody the business. I like that he was able to fight in pride and not be bound by the UFC, you know, rule set. You know, I also like he fought in an area where everybody was juiced out of their fucking minds, because I thought that was great.
The only thing that fucks me up with pride is like, man, I know for a fact there were fixes in pride.
Yeah, and it undermines and compromises a lot of it, you know, and I get that, you know, and I get it. I remember hearing Quentin Jackson talk about his fight with Sakuraba, how he came and had to cut like 30 pounds in like 2 days, or they weren't going to pay him, and you know, and they really like entertainment more than they like sport, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what that was about, entertainment. Asia's weird with that stuff. I've seen promoters pull wild shit. Like, I know big shows right now that don't make their guys cut weight.
Right.
They're still fighting at the weight class, right? The other guy's cutting weight. Whoever they brought in is cutting weight. They ain't cutting weight. You know, God knows what else they fucking do. But yeah, I see it all the time. It's just crazy. There's no rules here.
Right. All right. So if you have somebody who is coming to you and saying, I want to do MMA, I want to learn how to fight MMA, and I don't have any experience, but I'm an athlete, what's the advice you would give them?
I tell them, don't learn MMA right away. Get a base. I think if you try to learn all the skill sets in one shot, you're going to get very mediocre. So one of the things I do, and I have my fighters do when they're not in camp, is periodize their training. Okay. Right. So I like to spend a good chunk of time studying one aspect of the game. If I'm doing all mixed martial arts all the time, I'm not studying in depth anything. So my gains are going to be, and this is similar in strength and conditioning and anything else. You're not going to you can't make big strength and big speed gains at the same time, right? There's got to be an investment of one or the other. And so there's a give and take. So I tell them, you know, we'll kind of see what his natural tendencies are. And then, or what he sort of favors, or what his personality type might like the best, and start with that, man. Master something, right? And if you didn't start with wrestling, then you should probably, I mean, going straight to mastering wrestling is kind of tough. You know what I mean? So it's, yeah, BJJ or some kind of striking, like get a good foundation underneath you, at least 6 months to a year before you start thinking about mixing anything, right? If you don't have a martial art to mix, what are you going to mix? You're going to mix all of them at the same time? I don't think that's the most effective way to learn.
Yeah, I agree. It's, for a long time, I've considered myself a jiu-jitsu guy. And, I really don't agree with a lot of the politics in jiu-jitsu and just the sport. And, so as money enters into something, it becomes something different.
I'm with you.
My guys still have to be able to fight in the street. My guys strike on the ground. I remember, have you ever met Javi Vasquez?
Yes, I know who he is. I haven't met him, but he's
real cool dude.
Yeah.
Real good guy. He I've competed in a bunch of tournaments with him, different weight classes, but real good guy. He's highly skilled. He came out with a instructional series a few years ago, strike-based jiu-jitsu. And like, I get it, he's making money. Like, and if you learn how to fight from Javi Vasquez, you're doing okay. But I remember I used that as an impetus in my school to explain, like, we have jiu-jitsu and we have jiu-jitsu without strikes. There is no jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu with strikes, because inherently we should know how to be able to handle ourselves, outside of the street.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when the money comes, it's different. So there was a time where I stopped saying that we did jiu-jitsu in my school, or I stopped calling my school a jiu-jitsu school. And I've basically gotten over that, I think. I've always considered myself to be a jiu-jitsu guy, but when we look at how an individual develops, I think it is important to not only have the base, or maybe to have the base, but to sort of break that down. It's really just having an identity that they could sort of begin to compare things to and from, that sort of reference point. And I know as a wrestler, because I wrestled a year in high school, I wrestled, recreationally right up until I started jiu-jitsu. But when I started jiu-jitsu, it was as a wrestler. And it allowed me to try something, to have something to compare it to. Eventually, I became a jiu-jitsu guy. That identity changed. And from jiu-jitsu, I remember going to learn how to strike with Master Katz in combined martial arts. And I would go out there and I would learn to strike as a jiu-jitsu guy and learn where I wanted to be if I had my say. And it's that reference point that you could start climbing, almost like a ladder, to build a more complete game.
I never thought of it like that, as a reference point. That's actually a really good way to put it, man. Yeah, it's you got to start. You have to have a base somewhere to kind of hang your hat.
Right.
And that can change over time, but I think it's really important. I think you do a disservice by letting a day one just become a mixed martial artist. What the fuck are they mixed?
And I agree. And if you think about it, even the rules that we were describing, like, what are you training? Like, what? Because if you're talking about mixed martial arts, is a fucking sport, right? It's not a martial art, as much as promoters are going to try and say that, and people who are making money off of it are going to say it. Basically, it's a sport, and the rules change from promotion to promotion, to region, commission to commission. So even just training, MMA from the beginning, we'd have to say, well, what are we training? We're not training any specific thing. What we're training, if you're just training MMA from the beginning, is you're training a striking, you're training a jiu-jitsu, you're training a wrestling, and you're never really giving yourself the opportunity. Like you were saying, I also like periodizing my guys' stuff. You're never giving them an opportunity to actually breathe one identity to the point where they can actually develop it to where it becomes formidable.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. If you could change anything in MMA, what do you think that'd be?
If I could change anything in MMA, well, I definitely the rule set as we were talking, and I'd give a little bit more power to the fighters. I think this is a tough one. The monopoly grew the sport to where it's at, right? I don't think this new company is doing a good job with the UFC. And I use the UFC because, let's face it, man, if you're fighting in any show, like that's the World Series, right? That's the NFL. That's the big show. Anything else is college football or like, you know, the World Pro League or whatever, you know? And so it's hard to talk about the sport without talking about the UFC, because really what else matters as far as professional, you know, we're talking about the heights of the sport. Then you look at Conor McGregor, right? He transcended the sport, and then once he transcended the sport, he just kind of started pulling some crazy diva Madonna shit, which I get I get the shtick and I get how he sells himself. I don't necessarily admire the way he behaves, and you know, he can pick and choose fights now, and I don't think you should. I don't want necessarily the fighters to be bigger than the sport, but I do think they should have a little bit more representation, or at least see just a little bit bigger piece of the pie. I would definitely get rid of the Reebok deal.
Oh my God, that shit was
the
so
Reebok
tough.
deal. I know so many people personally that have lost tons of money because
Sure.
of the Reebok deal. It was just a horrible idea. Let the fighters keep their individualism.
Well, if you are, everybody's playing their role, right? Everybody's playing the game. So if you're the guy at the top of the mountain, who is, I think at the time it was Zuffa that made the deal, the Fertitta brothers and Dana White that made the deal with Reebok, it makes sense. You don't want your fighters to have any individualism. You don't want them to have any ability to become a Conor. Because the one thing about Conor that allowed him to transcend that sort of that glass ceiling of control is he was winning fights. You know, so you could talk all that shit that Conor was talking, but you better win all the fights that Conor won.
Yeah, and win them the way that he won.
Right.
You know? Not just winning, the way that he won. The way that he knocked out Aldo and the things that he's done. Unbelievable, right? So it's hard to say, man. Is it? How do you feel about that? Fighters transcending the sport, is that more important than, or does there need to be some order maintained?
I think that evolution is at its most effective when power is not centralized. So the more we allow freedom and liberty, the more sort of akin to a natural evolution things will take. So as far as the UFC and Zuffa, I think if you look at what will eventually be the long timeline of MMA, we're still, I feel, at probably the latter stages, certainly past the midpoint of the empire of the UFC. Yes. When I look at one championship, when I look at BAM, and I look at, even Bellator, who makes a run, every once in a while at being very competitive as far as the market share of attention for the MMA fan, I think empires fall. And I think anything that we do to prevent empires from falling might be fighting against the natural evolution of a thing. So I think with jiu-jitsu with the UFC, we have to expect that eventually they will have to play ball with everybody. The Reebok deal isn't something that they did; it's something that they got away with because they can. And I also find it. I could make a lot more money than I do. I could have a lot more business than I do. I could do a lot more things I could do if I was willing to compromise things for money. But I don't. And that's why, I still got to get up and go to work every day. I think when you look at a lot of the fighters who are put in that precarious situation of, do I do what is true to me, or do I just sell my soul to become part of the show? That's not a decision that I'm comfortable making for people. I would just as soon tell the UFC to go fuck itself before I allowed it to own me. Or, I remember when the UFC video game came out a few years ago, like people had to sign over their likeness to a game that they weren't getting any money for. It's like, listen, when you want that big stage, that big show, well, how badly do you want it? I tell my fighters that come in, or students of mine that want to become fighters, I want to make it to the UFC. I placate them in the beginning because that's all they know. You know, it's like when somebody calls my school and says, "Do you guys teach karate?" Yeah, we teach karate. Why? Because they don't know any better, right? Like, yeah, I know what you're looking for. Come in, see if we have it for you. But the UFC fighters, I think, or the MMA fighters that want to go to the UFC, as they start to evolve, I start to ask them, well, what is it about the UFC that you like? Oh, well, the money. Oh, let's look at the money. Let's look and see who's making money where. Let's see if you know how to actually market yourself and brand yourself, how much more money you can make in a show like Bellator than going and just worrying about training and going into the UFC.
Bellator's paying. I just had a guy sign, and his first fight is a fucking nice chunk of change, man. Like, Bellator's starting to pay, and I agree with you. I think the UFC's on its way out. I think this new company is trying so badly to make back their initial investment that they're putting on. They've basically forgotten the ranking system. Which is so the ranking system means nothing now. They're going after the circus fights, and it cheapens the product with your base. And you're not going to get rich off your base, right? You're going to get rich off the casual, right? The extra. But once you lose the base, I feel like you lose everything after that. Like, you got to maintain the base and then build on that with your big cards. But right. These circus fights are cheapening the product, and I think we're gonna see the end of the empire soon, and I don't think it's a bad thing, man. I'd like to see where there was two promotions, and you don't know which. When Pride and the UFC were competitive, you didn't know who was the best 205er in the world.
Right.
Right. There was so we could have arguments about it. We could have discussion. Oh, this guy would definitely. Really don't have that argument. If you're not the champ in the UFC, you're probably not the best fighter in the world.
Yeah, to that point, I think as the evolution continues, I think what will happen is something that'll represent a boxing model. I think you'll have marketable guys who people want to see, who understand how to put cards together. And I think these promotions will evolve into organizations or commissions or associations where you could be the guy who has the UFC belt, but can fight, whatever challenger that you and the promoter want to put together. I think that eventually the thing that allows people to be individuals, because you look at Conor is a tremendous fighter, obviously. His antics turn a lot of people off. I could, when I look at him throwing the fucking thing through the window in the bus, it's like, all right, what are we doing here? But I also know there's a lot of marketing leverage that happens after this whole event. And then now look at the fight coming up, which we'll get to in a second.
If somebody wasn't even paid off to let him do that.
Right. I mean? And this is, and the outside observer doesn't know about that. I don't think has enough bandwidth to really care about that. All they see is the energy and the whole shit. Did you see what that guy did? And, there's a reason WWE is still a business model and why they still pack fucking sellout stadiums. So there's an allure, there's a marketability to that I get. It's probably not my cup of tea, but I'm certainly not going to sit here and say, listen, Conor, you should not have made all those tens of millions of dollars by acting like a fucking madman.
Fuck, guy's rich.
Right. So I think that there's that is a little bit of foresight into what is going to be the model moving forward. I think certain individuals will become marketable. Certain individuals will be a high level, high skilled, and when those two elements combine, and you start having guys like McGregor, people like I had said before when the whole thing happened with the chair throwing he threw the shopping fucking thing. I don't know what he threw through a window. He threw something through the window. And when that happened, everybody was saying, oh, he's got to face charges. And I said, well, listen, what he should do is go to Ireland, hold his own fucking promotion, his own pay-per-view card, have Khabib come over, pay Khabib more than he's going to make in the next 10 fights in the UFC anyway. Just pay him all that money right here, have a pay-per-view, give him some fucking points on the pay-per-view card. Everybody makes more money than anybody. It would be the highest grossing MMA card in history, I think. You pay everybody. You have them fucking leave, whoever, is legally able to, leave whatever commitments they have. come over to your card, just a one-off MMA card. You hold a pay-per-view, give everybody points. Everybody makes money. You cut out all the middlemen. And that, when you look at what Floyd Mayweather's done with boxing and how much money he's in, that's the model. That's be the guy, and then be the guy that allows things to come together around and cut out all the middlemen. I think what happens is you wind up in MMA seeing similar to boxing, guys just aren't business savvy. Guys don't know about money. They don't know about branding. And, so these shyster type promoters and agents and managers, they're the ones that know how to play those games. Those are things that fighters don't want to be worried about, but they pay the price for it,
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's going to be interesting. Next 5 years are going to be wild.
Yeah, absolutely. So, final question. Conor Khabib, what do you think?
Well, each guy has one way to win, right? This is so fascinating because of that. So, Khabib, his striking leaves a lot to be desired, right?
It's fucking terrible.
Yeah, it was really bad. I mean, he did fucking pump that jab into Kinta's eye a lot.
Right.
And Al's no slouch as a striker. Like, Al's a decent – he's knocked out a lot of people. And I think people are given – Al had a decent collegiate wrestling career. So he was able to hand fight a little bit better than previous opponents to Khabib, right? And so he was able to get back to his feet and not get finished, which in itself was like quite an achievement. I don't think Conor has that ability to get up, right? So if Conor doesn't knock him out early, Khabib drags him to the floor, and that's it. He's getting drowned 100%. I do not see Conor getting up. I don't see any scenario in which Conor has developed the skills to get up. Like, Dennis Siver took him down like a couple of times. If you go watch that fight, Dennis Siver took him down with some pretty shitty shots. Granted, that was a few years ago, right? Khabib's just got to get his hands on him. Conor's just got to touch that jaw one time. I think Conor can knock him out. It's fuck, man. It's literally a coin.
You got to make a call, Eric.
If I got to make a call,
everybody knows that.
I'm going to say Khabib.
You think Khabib? You think?
Yeah.
Do you think he'll finish him? Do you think he'll win a decision? What do you think?
Oh, that fight does not go to a decision. Literally, one guy is going to finish. 100%. Conor's not winning a decision. Right? No way. Conor's either going to find that chin early, or Khabib's going to take him down and drown him. And when I say drown him, I see a mauling. Like I couldn't see that last. I couldn't see Conor lasting 2 minutes on the ground with Khabib.
Right. So here's my take. All right. So I say Conor is probably going to get clinched, probably going to get taken down that first round. I see him surviving because he doesn't try to win the fight from the bottom. One of the things that I think Khabib really does well is he mentally just rapes people. He is, and you've done enough sparring to know when you're sparring against a guy that never takes a step backward and is always in your face, it is fucking exhausting. Because you don't get to make any decisions. Right? You don't get to sort of pick and choose when you want to go. It's a constant just fucking suck. And I think Khabib does that better than anybody I've ever seen in MMA. And I think part of it has to do with the disparity in his striking versus his grappling. It's like he's not going to fucking bullshit anybody and say he's going to stand out here and do something. He just has this pace. Now, I know that Conor and his opponents have also commented on his pace and his ability to walk people down and stay in their face. You look at the Mendes fight. And Chad Mendes took him down a bunch of times. And obviously, Khabib brings a different type of wrestling to MMA than Mendes does. But Mendes took him down a bunch of times. And it stopped becoming the sort of overwhelming force in that fight, the Mendes-McGregor fight. I think with Khabib is much more effective doing damage once he gets the takedown than a lot of them. That's the difference. Right, and I think that's a huge difference. I think, well, Khabib does not take people's backs. He doesn't look to put hooks in. He just wants mauling top positions to maintain his activity. I think McGregor doesn't get mentally phased by that. I think McGregor winds up doing what's necessary to neutralize it. I think by the second round, McGregor is going to start fucking establishing that jab, stepping off with that left hand enough. Khabib gets hit. Khabib's been rocked before. I think it was Michael Johnson that rocked. You know, and I think when you look at now what McGregor is going to bring with that left hand, his mindset, I think the mindset is what saves McGregor. I think his left hand is what wins the fight. I say McGregor by TKO, meaning he stuns him and then follows up, second round.
I can't find a flaw with seeing it either way, to be honest. That fight's literally a coin toss because there's such a disparity between a fucking magical left hand and a magical ground game. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if they were like, if you were building a character on a video game, like Khabib's ground would be the magic level. Like the fucking, just like, you know, you'd have to use a special code to get that. And the same thing would be for McGregor's left hand. So it's like, and then in the middle, McGregor's ground game's pretty awful. And Khabib's,
I wouldn't say it's awful. I would say, well, I know a lot of the guys that he, not personally, but I know, you know, the team that he comes with. I'm familiar with like sort of 2 degrees of separation from a lot of the guys that he trains with. And I know they're thinking, they're thinkers.
Sure.
They're trying to solve problems. They're trying to figure out, you know, how to sort of remedy, you know, obstacles that they foresee happening. But I've also seen an evolution of McGregor's grappling. When he went against Nate Diaz the first time, I tell people, well, listen, he was too heavy. He went and tried to knock his block off early. And at that weight, he just couldn't maintain his cardio. Nate Diaz is a cardio freak. I think that he was absolutely burnt by the time that finish happened. I think when you look at the second fight, he made adjustments. And I think looking at the 2 Nate Diaz fights, you get to see, I think, a lot of how McGregor can admit fault, improve his vulnerability.
He's humble in that sense. He's humble in the sense that he's objective about his you know, his weaknesses. The one thing though I've heard from everybody that's ever done anything with Khabib is that when he grabs you, it's like, oh my God, like this is a different fucking creature that's holding on to me right now. Like, you know, we've all grappled strong guys, and you know, you're like, wow, this guy's strong. But I've heard Khabib is just a different animal altogether, man. Just a scary, different guy. So yeah, man.
Doesn't lose a round.
Doesn't lose a round. You know, doesn't lose a round. So it's man, it'll be interesting. It will be interesting. It's such a coin toss. That's why it's so exciting. I'll definitely be watching.
You know. Yeah, it's fucking awesome. All right, well, wrapping up somewhat. I know guys that you know that are listening to this are from a whole array of different, you know, lives and jobs and areas of the world and stuff. But I don't think you have anything to sell. but you have your gym. So if people want to go out and, you know, you were telling me before, and I'll tell you, it sounds really tempting. If people want to go out there and train for a spell with you at Phuket Top Team, what would you tell them to do?
You can contact me. You can just simply direct message me on Instagram is usually the easiest way to get in touch with me. I do check my mail.
What's your Instagram?
Eric the Gentleman.
Eric the Gentleman.
So you can catch me at Eric the Gentleman. Just starting to put more content on YouTube. So Eric Uresk Submission Grappling. I'm putting up really, really detailed stuff, ground stuff, all different types of stuff pertaining to MMA, submission grappling, wrestling. That would be very useful to anybody from sort of the hobbyist to an elite professional athlete. So you can check that YouTube channel out. There'll be a lot more content getting thrown down soon. It's already got some stuff up there. So I'm not really selling too much other than just, you know, trying to grow my name as a coach, build my brand that way, and you know, keep on this journey and just kind of see where life takes me. So,
that's awesome. So I got to say, I've known you for a long time, and holy fuck, you've changed, bro. And I'm really proud of you. It's good to see where you're at in your life right now and seeing the success that you are, man. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
It's an honor, man. I'm a big fan of your movement and your message, and I think it's important to empower people. And you say this all the time, and I've heard this saying before, and it's a saying that I use all the time. But there are no victims; there are only volunteers, man. And I think that message can't be passed around enough. It's teach people to be strong. Don't enable them in their weakness. I think that's super important. So please keep up the good work over there as well.
All right. Oh, and congratulations on your engagement.
Yeah.
Very nice. I don't know how guys like us find good-looking women who want to spend their lives with us, but we keep figuring.
Charisma. That's it.
All right, brother, man. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon, bro.
All right, brother. Thanks. Take it easy.